So let's go ahead and continue the story about Sigurd and Brynhild, okay? Sigurd's marriage and Brynhild's betrayal. Oh, be careful not to um, read beyond where I read because I will have some stopping for you. Sigurd's marriage and Brynhild's betrayal. So we already read how Sigurd wakened, wooed, and won the Valkyrie Brynhild. They lay together, and he swore to love her faithfully and return soon from his adventures to marry her. As a pledge of his love, he left with her the cursed ring of Andorana, which he had taken from Fafnir's hoard. Then he rode on to the castle of King Juki, where the birds whose words had guided him to Brynhild had promised him that he'd find his fortune. King Juki saw that his guest was strong and bold and also possessed of dragon treasure, and he made Sigurd very welcome indeed. So did his queen, Grimhild, and their sons, Gunnar, Hogni, and Guttern. But the king's daughter, Gudrun, fell deeply and hopelessly in love with their guest. Hopelessly, because he spoke often and fondly of his beloved and betrothed Brynhild. Grimhild saw her daughter's grief and took matters into her own hands. She was wise in the magic arts, and she made a potion and dropped it into Sigurd's drinking horn. Now Brynhild had taught Sigurd ale runes to guard against potions and poisons, but Sigurd had never been overcautious, and he thought he was among friends. He drank trustingly, and all his memories of Brynhild vanished as though they had never been. Then there was nothing to distract him from Gudrun's beauty and her high heart, and when Juki offered Sigurd his daughter's hand and a high place in the kingdom, Sigurd accepted delightfully. In time, Gudrun bore him a son, Sigmund. Sigurd still did great deeds in Juki's wars and was well beloved throughout the land, most of all by his brothers, the king's sons. But the eldest of those brothers, Gunnar, was weary of single life and wanted a wife. His mother, Grimhild, urged him to wed Brynhild, the loveliest and bravest woman she had heard of, and to get Sigurd's help in wooing her. Had Grimhild forgotten that Brynhild had drunk no draught of forgetfulness? Was she plotting Sigurd's death in jealousy over his fame? Was she simply caught up in Andvari's curse? Nobody knows. Now, after Sigurd's departure, Brynhild had remained in the castle on the Hindfell, and the wall of enchanted flames still blazed about her. When the brothers rode to the castle, Gunnar steeled himself to ride through the flames. But his horse shied away, and Gunnar didn't attempt the passage on foot. Sigurd's horse refused to bear Gunnar anywhere, and at last the brothers used a magic Grimhild had taught them to exchange shapes. Sigurd's horse still knew him when he wore Gunnar's form, and it carried him through the fire to Brynhild. And even when Sigurd stood gazing at his old love, Grimhild's spell still bound him so that he did not recall ever having seen her before. Brynhild was immortal and wise in many things, but in this she understood less than the horse. She thought that her wooed was indeed Gunnar, and at first she was loath to accept his offer, but he urged that he had promised to marry any man who passed through the flames. At last she accepted him, perhaps for the sake of her oath, perhaps because she believed the ordeal by fire proved his courage, perhaps because Sigurd was long away, and the daughter he had gotten on her, Aslog, was growing up fatherless. They plighted troth and lay in one bed, but Sigurd, meaning to keep faith with Gudrun and not betray Gunnar, laid his sword in the bed between them. When he rode away in the morning, bidding her follow him when she could, she gave him a ring. Yes, that ring, and Vernat's, the cursed. Okay. The Quarrel of the Queens. Brynhild was sore at heart for Sigurd's abandonment, but she consoled herself with the thought that she still had a husband and bold enough to pass the flames for her love. She came to Gunnar's father's court and married him in great splendor. But in the midst of the wedding feast, and the enchantment fell from Sigurd's mind, and he remembered how he had awakened Brynhild, learned from her, loved her, and sworn faith to her. His old love awakened along with his memory. Gudrun saw the shadow on her husband and wanted to know what dismayed him. At last he told her the whole bitter story, and he gave her Andvari's cursed ring, which he had given to Brynhild, which Brynhild had given back to him when she thought he was Gunnar. After that, Gudrun was bitterly jealous of Brynhild. One day, when the sister queens went to bathe in the river together, Brynhild insisted on washing herself upstream from Gudrun. She was cleaner, higher, and nobler than Gudrun, she said, for her husband had grown up in honor in his father's court, while Sigurd was a fosterling raised by a charity in a stranger's court. And Gunnar, moreover, had dared the flames for his love. Gudrun, not to be outdone, marched upstream from Brynhild and cried out that Sigurd had killed the dragon Fafnir, while Gunnar had not even had the courage to win his own wife, having instead gotten Sigurd to brave the flames in his place. When Brynhild protested that the man who lay with her had Gunnar's body, Gudrun laughed wildly and demanded, "And what did he do with the ring you gave him?" When Brynhild made no answer, Gudrun held Andvaratna up, flashing in the sun. Brynhild said no more to her sister queen. She went home cold and silent, but Gudrun was not done with the quarrel. The next day she asked with feigned sympathy what ailed her sweet sister and whether she wasn't pining for a better man than the one she had married. At that, Brynhild's rage broke out, and she swore that Gudrun would pay for stealing Sigurd. She added truly enough that Sigurd had to be drugged into loving Gudrun, whereas he loved Brynhild first and freely when he fathered Aslog. Gudrun, furious in her turn, cried out that at least he'd waited until after her wedding to sleep with her man, rather than bearing a bastard. Then Brynhild's anger turned cold. She shut herself away and lay as one dead, refusing food and speech. Her husband Gunnar came to her, begged her to live, and asked her what he could do for her. She answered that he had already done too much by tricking her into marrying a coward and a deceiver. Should she who would so sorry she who should have been a shield maiden forever and who had consented to marriage only on the condition that her husband should be both valiant and true. With that, she attacked him, and she would have killed him with his own weapons if his brother Hogni had not rushed in to his rescue. Together, they bound her hand and foot. "Very well," she said. He had deceived her, and now he could hold her captive if he would until she died. Not that that time would be long. But she would never again speak to him kindly or act as his queen, and would never again love any man but Sigurd. She screamed her mind mingled love and hate, and her voice echoed through King Juki's castle, and all the court trembled and wondered what evil would follow. The passing of Sigurd and Brynhild. Gunnar and Gudrun asked Sigurd to go see if he could make peace with Brynhild, who was still bound and could not attack him. First, he spoke pityingly and offered her gold. She snapped that she could not be bought, that she wanted only his heart's blood. He said he doubted she'd outlive him long. At this, she wept and said she did not care to live without his love. Sigurd, much moved, told Brynhild that he had loved her truly until Gudrun's mother's magic potion caused him to forget his first love. Perhaps he meant to prove his sincerity when he asked Brynhild to lie with him. Her answer was furious. She loved him, yes, but she still cared for her honor. If he cared nothing for his, and she was no adulteress. Sigurd offered to divorce Gudrun and marry Brynhild, but he looked absolutely miserable as he made the offer. Brynhild saw this and swore that she would have no man. Sigurd left her in despair, and Gunnar returned to her. First, he ignored her pleas for vengeance. Then he began to think how Sigurd's death would leave him unrivaled in prowess and in Brynhild's love, and also to think of the great treasure for which Sigurd had won from the dragon Fafnir, though as he brooded over the beauty of the gold, he did not remember the curse that lay on it. He consented to Sigurd's death. Gunnar had sworn oaths to Sigurd, which he dared not break himself, but he plied his brother Gudrun, who with perilous foods that made him bold and reckless, and he egged Gudrun on to kill Sigurd, and also to kill Sigurd's infant son, to forestall future vengeance. Even magically emboldened, Gudrun didn't dare confront Sigurd face to face. Instead, he crept into Sigurd's bedchamber at night and stabbed him. Sigurd waited too late to save himself, but in time to slay Gudrun. Gudrun woke covered in blood to find her husband dying and her son slain, and she cried aloud in grief and fear. Brynhild hear Gudrun's cries, and she laughed, but her laughter was terrible to hear, and there was no joy in it. Both Brynhild and Gudrun cursed Gunnar for betraying his oath, and they foretold that he would get no joy of the murdered man's gold. Then Gudrun went away weeping, but Brynhild, whom Gunnar had unwisely freed, killed herself, asking as she died that she might be burned alongside Sigurd, whom she joined in death, since she could not join him in life. This request was granted, and the golden flames of their pyre climbed toward the heavens.